I should get a real camera and some real equipment, but I'm a broke college student, so that's just not gonna happen. What is up, guys? So I've been writing since I was a wee child, and my guess is most of you guys have too. Even though writing as a child has a whole lot of benefits, it also has a major drawback. It means that you write a whole lot of bullshit. So if you've been writing since you were a child, you have a whole arsenal of really bad stories that you would never show anyone. Even if you haven't been writing since you were small, you probably still have an entire collection of half-finished books that you know are never going to get done. So today we're going to talk about those books. The ones you have finished, the ones you have yet to finish, and the ones you have yet to start. This is the 7 books that you've definitely written. I've got my crazy socks and I'm ready to go. Let's do this. The first kind is the book you hate yourself for writing. You most likely wrote this book in middle school or high school, and when you did, you most definitely thought that it was going to be a New York Times bestseller. However, looking back, you realize that you were very wrong. Maybe you finished it, maybe you didn't, it doesn't really matter. The point is, you really thought you had something, and now you just look back and cringe. I mean, this is the type of story that you use as comedy. And even though the writing is bad, that's not even the worst part of this type of book. The worst part is knowing that at one point you thought it was amazing, and now whenever you look back, you just hate yourself. For me, this book came in the form of a novel I entitled Above Los Angeles. Sadly, this book is on Wattpad. I haven't taken it down, so if you wanted to read it, you could, but I highly advise against it. If it gives you any indication, the book is about a girl that can fly. Need I say more? My advice for this one is to take all the lessons that you learned from it and move on. Number 2, the book you never quite finished. This is a book that had you super hyped for a super long time, and you really just wanted to finish it and get it out into the world. The problem was something happened near the end, and you never actually got done with it. Maybe you lost interest, maybe it got too boring, maybe you realized that it wasn't as good as you once thought. Either way, this book is about 50,000 words and sitting somewhere just waiting for you to come back to it. But if you're like me, you didn't leave enough notes to come back to it. My own version of this book was called I Can't Say His Name, and I had a really awesome idea and a really awesome plot twist at the end. The plot twist was she killed her boyfriend, and that's why all this has been happening to her. Long story. So I couldn't wait to get up to that moment, and somehow in the middle it got boring and I lost interest and I stopped writing. So I kind of regret that, but at the same time I know it was bad, and I'm a little glad that I didn't spend time on the end of it. My advice for this one is to really examine it. If you think that it deserves to be finished, then push your way through it and you will feel so much better about yourself. But if you feel like it's just bad and you have no clue why you wrote 50,000 words of it in the first place, it's okay to dump it and move on to other things. Number 3, the book you've been working on since the beginning of time. This is a book idea that you've most likely had for 5 to 10 years. Of course, this book is nowhere near where you've started. You've fallen in and out of love with it since then, you've changed the entire cast and the entire setting, and you've done about 50 plus drafts, and yet you just can't seem to push through. For me, that book was titled Mortals, and I began it about 5 years ago when I was 13. I have gone through so many drafts of it, so many revisions, and I just can't seem to finish it. I think I finally dropped it after writing one draft with 100,000 words, but I never know when I'm gonna turn around and start writing it again. I might, I don't know. My advice for this one is to set it aside for now, for about 6 months, and come back in a little while and examine if you really do have the desire to finish this novel, or if it's not very good and you really don't care anymore. Number 4, the book you've only outlined. This is a really epic idea, and you should really write it, but you don't. For some reason. Maybe you don't have the time, maybe it's too boring to start, maybe you don't know what the first line's gonna be, maybe you don't know what the ending's gonna be. You've got a full outline, an entire book ready to be put onto paper, and yet you just can't do it. For me, this book was called Oaktown, and I began it a long time ago in a galaxy far away. I put it through several different settings and changed the ending a little bit each time, and yet for some reason, I never got past sentence 1. I actually have multiple outlines of this book in multiple different time periods with multiple different titles, but none of them ever got written. My advice for this one is to deeply examine it. See if there's some reason that you just can't write it. Maybe it's too boring. Maybe you can't come up with a great way to start the book. If that's the case, you can probably fix those things. But if you examine it and realize that it's not as good as you once thought, it is okay to just set the outline aside and forget about it. Number 5. The book you've planned 20 sequels for. Maybe you've written parts of this book already, maybe you have yet to even start it, but the point is, you have huge plans for it. This book is going to have 5 sequels, and they're all going to be bestsellers, and then you're going to get a movie, and then you're going to get interviews all over the world because people love you. Or maybe you're not as dramatic as me, and you've literally just planned about 20 sequels for it. Either way, this book has big plans. And yet, you haven't actually written those 50 sequels now, have you? From what I've heard, a lot of authors will write their first book and then start looking at the possibility of a sequel. And although that's not always what you have to do, you should be realistic about your sequels. You can write down ideas for your sequels, maybe even a rough outline, but don't plan every little detail of your sequel and forget to write the first book altogether. I once had a book called Experiment Firefly, which was about an experiment which kept 40 children in a laboratory for their entire lives to try to make them perfect. At the end of the book, one of the employees, who the story was told from the perspective of, was going to break them all out, and the next, 5 books were going to be all about their journeys after. I had actual names for the other books, I knew everything about them, I was so ready to write them, and yet I only got to chapter 5 on the original. So I had to tell myself, calm it down, one step at a time, and then I actually dropped the book, but that's not the point. Quite honestly, I was not being realistic enough. My advice to anyone with this problem is to cool it and focus on the first book. I know you're excited for the whole series, but the thing is, if your first book isn't very good, no one's going to want to read the other ones. So focus time on your first book and just jot down notes about the rest. You'll get to them in good time. Number 6. The book that you just write for yourself. This is the book you've already accepted sucks and that no one's ever going to read it, so why share it? For some reason you find it super fun to write. Maybe it's because it has more description than a book should have, maybe it's because it has no description at all. Either way, this book is there for you if you ever just want a fun, non-stressful writing project. You'll probably never get done with it, and even if you do, it will probably make no sense, but it's there for you when you need it. I wrote a book about me and my friends where we were all siblings fighting over land, which was a terrible idea, and I knew it from the start, but I started writing it because I just wanted to kind of put me and my friends in the past warring against each other. I thought that'd be super fun. And it is super fun for me, but I don't expect anyone else to ever read that book. My advice to people writing novels like this, that's totally cool. There's no problem with it, but if you ever want to get a book published, maybe don't spend all of your time on your fun novel. And the final one, number 7, the book you love too much to write. Most of you guys have probably never experienced this, but for the few who have, you know what I mean. You love this idea. This idea is your baby. The outline is your baby. Everything about it makes you just want to sob because you love it so much. But you know that if you ever begin writing it, you'd fuck it up. So you wait until you're older and more experienced and maybe have a better idea of how to start it to actually write the book. I get this. I understand. I have a book like this that I have not written for years because I was just so scared of messing it up. But I am actually writing it now, which I am so excited about. Now here's my advice for people with that problem. I had a book for years called Child of the Earth that it's a working title. I don't like the title. Okay, don't judge me on the title. I love the idea. I thought it was amazing, and yet I was a little unsure about writing it because I knew I'd screw it up. However, one day I told myself that editing is a thing that exists, and I started writing it, which I was a little scared about. You guys can see my journey of writing this one actually in the video Writing a Book in 2 Months, which was my previous video. And even though it did not turn out nearly as good as it did in my head, I am still happy that I wrote it. Look, I'm going to set that manuscript aside. I'm not going to look at it for a very long time, and when I come back, I'm going to make the necessary edits and see if it's salvageable. But the thing is, having a book that's crappy is better than having no book at all. Trust me, I know that. So yeah, that's my advice. If you have a book that you think you'd ruin if you ever wrote it, write it anyway. If you don't like the way it turned out, you can always wait until you're more experienced and try again. So yeah, those are the 7 types of books that you've definitely written. Tell me down below if I was right about any of them, if I missed any of them. Just tell me what you thought. I love to hear your feedback. And until then, may the gods of plot be ever on your side. For me, this book was called Oaktown, and it began long ago in a galaxy far, far away. For me, this book was called Oaktown, and it began in a galaxy far, far away. For me, this book was called Oaktown, and it began in... For me, this book was called Oaktown, and it began long ago. I cannot get the Star Wars quote right. Oh my gosh, I know Star Wars. For me, this began a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I forgot to say name. Oh, I finally got the quote right. Dang it.